For the past several days, you have been riding north through the Black Forest, pressing on through the thick cluster of pine and oak as you follow the worn cobblestone road. You have been straining your horses, pushing them onto the fortress city of Sturmenburg. Considering your pace, you should be within an hour of Sturmenburg's outer wall. You must reach the city quickly to aid its defenders. You have been dispatched by the ranger, Vosric the Stonecrow, after he received a letter from the captain of the guard, Arn. Arn's letter was disturbing, detailing the escalating assaults of beastmen hordes on the city and the portents of much darker tidings to come. As you mull over the words of Arn's letter, you glimpse a small fire ahead. You pull on the reins of your horse, bringing it to a halt. Ahead, down a short hill on the side of the road, you spy a weak campfire. A man clad in armor sits in front of the dying flame, his back to you, propped up against a thick log. Above, ominous clouds have begun to roll, blanketing out the dying afternoon sun and leaving the forest in shadow. Kuzi, the head priest of the cult of Annihilator, is the first to dismount from his horse. He approaches the tree line to the left, studying it with his one good eye, as the rest of the group proceeds with dismounting from their exhausted horses. Wingurik, watching the motionless knight, feels unease, and he makes his way to the right of the path to hide behind a rock near the tree line. Pressing his back tightly against the rock, he begins to peer around the edge, and is shocked to discover a shattered longsword. With his feathered fingers, beckons to TJ. TJ inspects the holy symbols that are inscribed on the bloodied, shattered sword. As Ring and the others approach the knight, slowly picking up pieces of new information as they draw near to the scene, slowly becoming more unsettled with every new detail. A scroll beside the knight. The knight's body slumped over in an unnatural position. The blood. Dread begins to sit in, as a loud crackling energy and flashing of green light appears from behind. Kuzi launching his powerful spells into the beastmen whose horns started to peer out of the tree line. Wingurik's voice rings out.
It's an ambush.
4 beastmen push their way out from the trees. 2 of them, humanoid goatmen, dart out, their small frames making them much more agile than the third, with significantly more muscle mass and slightly more bullish features. As for the fourth, it towers over the other beastmen, its large, ripped muscles twitching as it lowers its horns towards Kuzi, who just singed its once glorious mane. It lunges forward but immediately falls to the ground as a white sticky webbing traps all 4 savage beasts, pinning them to the ground. Kuzi cracks a smile and begins to laugh. Annihilator will relish the folly of these beasts. The struggling beasts attempt to break the webbing, frothing from their mouths. The largest almost succeeding, only to look up in abject horror as the rest of the party surrounds it with bloodied weapons. It looks down to its lifeless comrades, riddled with gashes and holes. It breathes in deep to let out an enraged battle cry. but only silence permeates the forest. You and the rest of your group start searching the bodies of the beastmen. Guy kneels down next to the dead crusader and begins to chant a prayer. Henry picks up the bloodied scroll that was next to the crusader and begins to skim over its contents. He passes the scroll to Kuzi. The dead crusader body begins to twitch. Then, slowly and shaking, it stands on its feet. A devilish smile forms on Kuzi's old wrinkled face. Well, let's go and show these northerners that we are much more useful than the Empire. You, wait here for the rest of the undead and join them. There is a city in need of much liberating. The sun has set and the rolling black sky pours sheets of cold rain and sleet, turning the ground to slick mud. You push onward, your horse's hooves squelching in the sodden dirt until, drenched and shivering, you finally approach the massive walls of Sturmenburg. The outer wall, named Traz, is constructed from enormous monolithic stones as large as houses. The walls rise far overhead, towering into the darkness. Atop of the ramparts, you see large bonfires dispersed every 100 yards, illuminating powerful battlements and garrisons of patrolling soldiers. A horn sounds as you approach the great Ulf Gate, and its thick double doors open, revealing a cavernous archway protected by layers of portcullis. A giant of a man stands within, clad in hardened leathers interspersed with steel plates. He towers above you, hefting a wrought iron hammer the size of a blacksmith anvil. He cracks his neck as he speaks to you, his voice echoing like a drum. State your business, strangers. In a loud and clear voice, Ring states,
We are part of the Rangers, and believe that Captain Arn requested us to aid with the city defense.
Hammerhelm looks over the group with squinted eyes.
Very well.
Hammerhelm's booming voice calls out,
Open the gate!
and the metal portcullis gates rise, clamoring as they clear the way to the city. The giant man calls a guardsman, ordering the guard to escort you to Captain Arn at the Tempest Tavern. The guardsman nods, marching ahead of you. You follow him into the city, venturing behind the titanic walls and witness the sheer extension of the city's first ring. Houses sprawl as far as the eye can see. The streets are filled with busy peasants and marching soldiers. Entire sections of the city are devoted to merchants and craftsmen, and a river runs through the district, surrounded by farms, orchards, fisheries, and cattle barns. Young children spar with each other in the training yards, striking each other ferociously with blunted metal weapons, covered in bruises and blood. But underneath their bravado, you feel an uneasiness in the eyes of the children and the militia, and the peasants that hurry back and forth bearing supplies and weapons. There is an unspoken fear that permeates the night air. You hear a man yell, and the clanging of a small bell. People quickly clear the middle of the road as a wagon laden with corpses trundles by, carrying men and women. torn apart and still clutching their swords and spears, their limbs held together only by threads of viscera. It heads further into the city, towards the second Great Wall, Wall Sten, which rises even higher than the first. Your escort beckons you to follow. Come, I'll pass the line the same way. Ring, the undead general of Long Beach, looks at the guard and asks him his name. My name's Bawa. We have a while before we reach the Tempest Tavern. I heard that you are the rangers and have come to help us with the beastmen. Please, ask anything. I'll try to help you how I can. Ring, attempting to gather more information about the beastmen and what has been happening in the city, asks about Bauer's experiences out on patrol. Well, the beasts have been attacking much more frequently and in larger numbers. This alone wouldn't be much of a problem, but they seem to be much smarter as of late. They light traps and started using devious maneuvers that throw us guards off. And because of this, the city's casualties have increased dramatically, as you can see by the cart full of corpses. And worse yet, the city's seer, Groom, has been afflicted by terrible visions as of late. His visions of death and destruction. He sees the great flame taken over by darkness. He hears the screaming of men at night. If you wish to speak to him, you can do so at the Temple of the Inflame, which is by the Great Pyre. Kuzi has taken an interest in the carts full of bodies, and this temple of which Bauer speaks. However, he doesn't ask about them. He talks about the Empire, their involvement in Sturmenburg, watching how Bauer responds to the question. Well, the Empire don't provide us with much. I hear we ask for aid time and time again, and nothing comes of it. You would think they would aid more, since we prevent the beastmen from reaching them in the north. Bauer mutters under his breath, if only they would send more aid, then maybe, perhaps my sister. If you wish to know more about the Empire, perhaps you should be talking with the ambassador. He would know much more than I would. The guard leads you on through a gate in the second Great Wall. As you climb the cobbled streets, you pass a temple, outside of which great pyres burn. The corpse cart is parked outside, and two men have begun unloading the bodies, or pieces thereof, onto the ground nearby. The guard leads you past the scene, taking you along the outskirts of the third and final city wall, Wall Stall. The last wall's great ramparts tower over Sturmenburg, and you see a great horn mounted atop of it on an elevated platform. The horn gleams bronze in the firelight. A moment later, the guard brings you through a town square, lined with dozens of makeshift shops. As you pass through, you see smiths and armorers work tirelessly as the tireless ring of hammer on steel rings loudly in the air. Bloody armor with gaping holes and slashes, and broken weapons are piled into heaps before being shoved into great stone furnaces to be melted and reshaped anew. Guards mill about in front of a large two-story building, strapping on gear and talking. The building windows are alight, and you hear ruckus shouts and merriment from inside. Your escort takes you through the front door, revealing a tavern filled with drink and feasting. But as you enter, he murmurs a quick goodbye. The captain is at the end of the hall, at the command table. I must take my leave. With that, the guard leaves you. Across the hall, you can make out the captain dressed in fine armor. He is bent over a long table with several maps and surrounded by soldiers. They are in deep conversation, moving wooden pieces around the map. You let yourself known, and Captain Arn is pleased to see you. Perfect timing. These beastmen have been quite busy. But before we get down to business, have some food and drink. You must be tired from your journey. After the party receives pitchers of mead and plates of food, Arn begins with briefing the party about their mission. So, our city has slowly been losing the fresh water that comes in. We sent scouts into the forest and discovered that the beastmen have piled hundreds of logs into the river. From what reports say, the blockage is dense, and it will take a tremendous effort to destroy. This is new for the beastmen, as they've never shown such ingenuity before. That said, we will send the wagon with many explosives upstream. You are to guard the wagon and unload the barrows at the river blockage. We estimate 3 barrows will be needed to destroy the blockage. Now, I'm no fool. You have traveled for days, and you may need to rest and resupply. I'll have the wagon waiting for you at the northern woods gate, so do what you need to, and then gather there. Once the talking concluded, the party begins to leave without revealing the letter from Lord Lucius, which they found during the ambush when they were traveling to Sturmenburg. As you leave, Captain Arn turns toward a cohort of soldiers that have been gearing up while you talked. He gives them a riling speech as you depart. Okay, lads, listen up. You've survived countless nights, and tonight will be no different. We defended our walls for the sake of our families, our friends, and the peace of our forebearers. Remember, you do not have permission to die when you return. Drinks are on me, so go out there and give them hell. With the clamoring of shields, the guards salute Captain Arn and march out in the opposite direction. Kuzi splits from the party, heading towards the Temple of the Great Inflame, as everyone else goes to the stores. Beaner, the Minotaur paladin who serves under his god, Lord Carniasada, notices everyone staring at him with disgust, as he looks very similar to the beastmen that have been killing the citizens for generations. But this does not disturb Beaner in the slightest. All he cares about is making his way to the blacksmith so they can attach the horns he acquired from the earlier beastmen to his armor. Once the deed was done, the party went to the Temple of the Great Inflame to find Kuzi. You make your way to the Great Pyre, its flames licking hungrily at the skies, giving off a great plume of smoke as it devours the pile of corpses that were earlier stacked on the cart. Bauer, the guard who escorted you to Captain Arn, kneels on the ground nearby, his body hunched in defeat. An old man in a ragged cloak, hood drawn over his head, walks shakily toward Bauer, speaking gruffly and placing a wrinkled hand on his shoulder.
Rise, warrior. Your loved one lies not in flame, but in darkness. Hope remains.
Bauer rises, thanking the old man and registering you momentarily before leaving. The old man turns to you, drawing back his hood. In the firelight, you see his face is twisted and marred, covered in ancient burns. One empty eye leaks a stream of white liquid, while the other, faded and lidless, stares at you. He speaks, his voice hoarse.
And what do these strangers seek from our gods?
Ring asks the seer about the dark visions that have been plaguing him as of late.
I see beasts with demonic hides, horned monsters with twisted forms, towering giants that tear the very earth with their steps as they draw closer to the city. Towering giants that tear the very earth with their steps as they draw closer to the city. Men, women, and children screaming as they are slaughtered in their homes, and a great shadow on the horizon.
Taking in the information, Ring also asks if he has seen an old man. Gorm immediately starts ranting about a man showing up with no understanding of their people's culture and no respect for the dead. Ring looks around and sees Kuzi talking to the people who hauled the corpse cart. Kuzi appears to be pointing at the cart and then at a back alley. The workers nod, and then Kuzi places a gold piece in the hands of the workers. Ring turns back to the old man, thanking him for his time as the party starts to leave. As you leave, the old man falls to his knees, shaking as his one eye stares into the flames of the great pyre, his gnarled hands raised above his head. He speaks loudly, his voice suddenly reverberant and full.
Tremors in the earth. Shadows consume the flame. Ashes. Ashes. A sunrise bathed in blood.
Then, just as suddenly, the man reverts to normal, his voice raspy and weak once more. He looks to you as his body rocks.
Hurry to your task, for our fates are intertwined tonight.